Hello. So today we are going to be talking about Educated. This is a book I read as an audiobook. I will say that right off the bat, I was told that it might be better to listen to as an audiobook. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So this book is a memoir by Tara Westover. It's a nonfiction story of her life and what she experienced. So she is somebody who grew up as Mormon. She grew up in Idaho, in a small town in Idaho, in a family of seven. I think it was total 7 kids, and then their 2 parents. And basically, they're like hardcore. She doesn't have a birth certificate until she turns 9, I think. Her father doesn't believe in sending her to school, doesn't believe in going to hospitals. She has no medical records, no school records, because they're untrustworthy of the government, the Illuminati. Just everything is corrupt, and they're trying to separate themselves. This family is trying to separate themselves as much as they can from the outside world because they think that the world is going to end from Y2K, for example, and just lots of conspiracy theories that others were also believing in. But these people were hardcore, like didn't trust, the government, the medical industry, and all of that. So like it was more so that God and his angels will keep you in their hands, and you'll be safe in their hands, and we don't need anybody else to help us. And if you do get hurt, Tara's mother, she was a midwife and later became like a self-proclaimed healer. Basically, she would heal her children by you read the book to find out, but it's interesting. It has unique ways to heal them, and also creates like a essential oils business, I believe. So anyway, and this book is about her basically finding education, and not just school education to say, okay, I'm going to learn just like the rest of the kids in school. It's her like educating herself on, whoa, like I grew up this way until I was 16 and didn't have any sight of the outside world, like didn't even know things like the Holocaust, like even at that level of just having no knowledge of what's going on outside her own bubble, like really just growing up entirely in a bubble with she had homeschooling, but her homeschooling, I read this line in the book. It said something like, Mom would say we would do school today, and by doing school, I would take a math book, I would open it up, and I would run my finger down the bind, like center bind of the book, and then flip a page. And for every page that I passed, that was how many pages I did that day. So I told Mom I did 50 pages of math that day. And it was like literally, like not even glancing at the content on the page. She's just running her finger down. So like it was that level of like, that's what her family's understanding of getting an education was at home, and constantly stood by like, your mother will teach you, you'll go to school here, like people will learn, people will see this is the right way to do it. And oh my gosh, honestly, my biggest takeaway from this book, aside from just like this is great insight to have on what other people experience, is just like, whoa, like how did these children survive? How did they make it to the next day? There were so many, like a weird amount of instances that happened. And I mean, I guess it's not that weird once you understand it, but like things that happened that were like, these people should not have lived to the next day, like, let alone make it to 18 years old. The father had his kids work with him in this junkyard, and I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but just like, just really that mindset of like, whatever we do is fine. You don't have to take any safety precautions because God and his angels really will guide you, and they will protect you. And that was it. Like he had no concern of anything else. Like he didn't want them wearing helmets because it would like slow them down. Don't wear gloves because it'll distract you more or whatever. Like I think they did wear steel toe boots, so that's great. But like, it just like, it leaves me speechless. Like, and it did leave me speechless while I listened to this. Like, I even just out loud be like, oh my gosh, like, how is this okay? Like, anyway, so throughout this book, she basically finds her way out of this life, and it just slowly has different bursts of like, this is what life is really like for other people. And in that process of her seeing that, she's like looking like, throughout the timeline of the book, she accepts the outside world more and more, but especially right at the beginning, she's just as judgmental, if not more, than her own father of the outside world, saying like, why do they do that? Oh my gosh, she's a whore for dressing in, like, showing her neck. Like, if I, if my shirt went up to here, or anything that wasn't to your wrist, to the top of your neck, to the ankles, like, you're a whore, and you're basically trying to invite other men into your body, and that's whore's behavior. And how could you do that? It's so improper. And we all understand this to an extent, but really seeing it, like, understand that people live this way and this is their stance, but seeing it through this lifestyle that these people have and understanding what they're going through. Sorry, I'm just like looking at my notes. It's just so bizarre, enlightening, really, and allows you to take what you have for granted. Like, I feel like anybody could, believe these things if that's how they're raised. I mean, the environment that you're raised in is a lot of what you become. And so seeing this and seeing that she was able to surpass and overcome and see the light of other possibilities and other people and what they do and why that's okay, and to dive into that is just, it was left me speechless more times than I can count. And wow. So that's really the process of this book. So I will say I recommend this book. This is something that it's so much more than just, a regular fiction book. I mean, that's what nonfiction is. And this memoir, there's 100% a story here to be told that is super valuable for others to just learn from and to experience what they went through. And just a few things that I just want to make note of throughout this process of her going through learning about the rest of the world. And she goes on to go to college and eventually get her PhD. And I think that's not a major spoiler. I mean, you understand that she's getting this education, but just the real story is the process of her going through this, and what is the price to pay to get this education. And the education, like I said, not just from school, but education from the world and understanding what other people do and how they live. And throughout this, she just has so much self-doubt on herself because she was so cornered to believe in only one way and understand and believe that that is the right and everything else is so wrong. And, people today, and at least from the way I was raised, I really don't want to speak for too many people because clearly there's just so much going on that you don't know about or just don't fully understand, can't fully grasp because it's not your direct experience. And, but what was I literally just going to say? I'm losing it. Jeez. I missed it. Dang. Okay. Well, anyway, she just really does have a lot of self-doubt and her process of seeing everything through these other people and understanding that the way that she was raised is maybe not, oh my gosh, not the, necessarily correct way. Sorry, I had a fuzzy floating around. Correct way for everyone, and maybe not for herself, and it may be for her family, but what is really right and what is really true and what does she really need? And who is she going against by admitting that? And it's just really puts it in your face. It's really interesting. Another thing was the treatment that she gets from her family is, like, from an outsider's point of view, is just absurd. It's absurd, and of course, to somebody who's in the middle of it and taking it and experiencing it, it's probably a completely different feeling, thinking that they're doing the right thing and looking out for her and trying to do what's right. But just the way that some of these beliefs and values are pushed on her, I struggled. I really struggled through that. So anyway, I don't want to harp on that too much, but it just really shows through her journals and her notes and the way she tells it that you really end up making excuses for those that you love. Sometimes people do that. It's a thing that happens. Everybody does it. And to what extent you really see that in this book and learning from that and seeing it over time and understanding, like, wow, I really thought that was okay when I was growing up. And now understanding, like, I don't know, it's just wild. So, anyway, that's pretty much what this book is about. What are you paying for when you're really getting your education, and what are you losing and what are you gaining? And, it takes you in so many different directions. So I do recommend this book, and I'm going to go into spoilers because I've already gone 9.5 minutes just trying to give a basic review, but this book is not basic, so it's hard to do that. Anyway, thank you for listening. I do recommend, I'm going to go into spoilers. You should read this book. If you're willing to have a thick skin, you should read this book because it's pretty heavy at times, but it's good. Okay, spoilers. So what I wanted to say was, it was so interesting seeing from what she got from her dad was so interesting because he was pushing her, saying like, no, you aren't allowed to go to school, no, and he was so baffled anytime that she really did push against what he was saying. But even when she did that, he never cut her off. He never did that. He never personally, I mean, I guess at the end he did, like he cut her off with, you know, ultimatums, I guess you could say. Like there were ultimatums, and if she didn't meet them, then he would cut her off, and that's eventually what ends up happening, as you know. But like even when she was going to Harvard, I think it was, he was like, I'm coming. And she was so surprised. He was like, why are you coming? And she realized it was that he was coming because he was still trying to save her. Even after all these years of her saying that she's trying to go down this path and trying to get this education and learn and do it this way, even though it's so against what he valued, he still was like, I'm coming to save you because you need us. I'm giving you one last chance. And he always was pushing it, but it was always on his terms. It was never on her terms, ever. And it just, oh my gosh, it's so interesting to see that dynamic. And wow, okay. It was interesting how she would leave for school and like go and excel in college and then abroad and then back to get her PhD. She would always excel. And then anytime that she came back home, she was always confined again into that cage, into that like 16-year-old girl that just had nowhere to go and had no insight of what life really was and what is really right, what is really wrong. And so interesting to see that. Just every time she would come back, it was like, you know, back in her cage. This is literally just one word I put on my notes: Sean. I cannot say enough. Oh my God, I don't, still no words. It's not often that I have a character in a book that now I know, you know, and knowing that it's not even a character. This is a real individual out in the world, and there are so many individuals like this person, and I'm like getting emotional just talking about it right now. And it's hard to even read about him because it's like she had 7 other siblings. I'm a firm believer in like, if somebody's a bad person in their life, a lot of it has to do with how they were raised, but there was no other sibling that treated her the way Sean did, and there was no other person that made her feel so small and so insignificant and so incapable and so wrong and so like, I have so many words. I have so many words for this person that just, and he's created a family, so it's all being passed down. Like, oh my God, I could go on and on about like, just wow, so much frustration and anger and sadness and feeling like incapable of being able to do anything. Like just reading it and being like, and seeing that there's really no way out for her naturally in her, you know, when you're on the inside, it's just impossible. And anyway, and then one last thing I did want to say, because I looked at some other reviews and some other articles just about this book, because this really got a lot of attention, naturally, just from being such a wowing story that people had the opportunity to, like myself, got the opportunity to read. And this has been just an amazing experience being able to read this book. But I did just want to say a lot of people, not a lot, but there was a little bit of discussion about how accurate, like how accurate all the details are in the book. And I just want to point out that even though not every detail may be exactly accurate, I mean, it's literally impossible. She's trying, you know, talking about conversations that happened however many years ago at this point that she's actually writing this novel or memoir. But these specific conversations or whatever, these details, although they may not be exact, that does not invalidate this story that she is sharing with us. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with emphasizing, and even if there is a little bit of over embellishment, and nobody can really know, like there's no way to fully confirm, and I just don't think that's the point. I don't think we're supposed to be diving in to really aggressively dig that hard to say like, oh, well, this wasn't necessarily maybe happened that way. Like there are people that experience this all over the world, and if this was her experience and this is her interpretation, she's choosing to share that with us, we need to take it for what it is. And there are people that have these kinds of experiences all over the world in different ways as well. So I think it's more important to just take what we can from the story and appreciate that and just take perspective from that, because I think that's really the point of this, is to really see what's happening and who's experiencing this, and that there are people that are having this. So anyway, that's pretty much everything. A lot of thoughts, a lot of emotions in this book, and just really hard to listen to at times. I don't know how it would have been if I read it. I wonder if it would have been harder or easier, but I'm the kind of person that if there's something that's literally giving me pain, like by reading it, just from some of the things that Sean would do to her, like everything, choking her, beating her, shoving her face into the ground, twisting her wrist and bending her over, like just so many things. I can't read that. I don't know. And maybe it's easier I guess it must have been easier as an audiobook, but there were times I was like, I need to just block this out. It's important to understand what's going on, but like in the world, but I don't know. It's really tough. Anyway, great book. A lot to take out of it. I do recommend it. Again, as long as you have a bit of a thick skin, I do recommend it. So I guess, yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening. Thank you.